In an age long before modern conveniences, medieval people relied on ingenious survival techniques to endure harsh winters, limited food supplies, and unpredictable dangers. While we often think of the medieval era as a time of primitive living, many of their survival tricks remain surprisingly effective and relevant today. From preserving food without refrigeration to building makeshift shelters, here are 10 medieval survival tricks that can still be life-saving in the modern world. Salting and smoking were more than just culinary techniques in the medieval era. They were essential survival skills that allowed people to store food for months without refrigeration. Salt was a powerful preservative, drawing out moisture and creating an environment hostile to bacteria and other microorganisms. Medieval people would pack meat and fish in thick layers of salt, ensuring every part was thoroughly covered. The salt would penetrate the flesh, dehydrating it and preventing spoilage. In some cases, the meat was left to cure for weeks, allowing the salt to fully infuse and create a barrier against bacteria. Smoking was another vital method of preservation. While today we might associate smoking with adding flavor, in the past, it was a critical way to extend the shelf life of food. After salting, meat or fish would be hung in a smokehouse or over a fire pit. The slow burning of hardwoods like oak or hickory would envelop the meat in dense, aromatic smoke. This smoke contained phenols and other compounds that acted as natural preservatives, killing bacteria and warding off insects. The combination of salt and smoke could keep meat edible for months, even in warmer climates. Moreover, medieval people had to be strategic about when they preserved their food. The cold winter months were the perfect time to slaughter livestock, as the naturally low temperatures aided in the preservation process. Additionally, drying and storing foods in high places, away from moisture and pests, became a common practice. Foods like fish, sausage, and even fruits were hung from rafters, allowing air circulation to complete the drying process. Interestingly, some medieval households employed a technique called larding, in which meat was encased in a thick layer of animal fat. This method not only kept the meat moist, but also created an airtight seal, further preventing spoilage. In times of extreme scarcity, people even stored meat in wooden barrels packed with brine, a highly concentrated saltwater solution. This pickling method not only preserved the meat, but also flavored it, making it a staple in long sea voyages and military campaigns. Today, these preservation methods are still relevant for survivalists, preppers, and anyone interested in off-grid living. Learning how to salt, smoke, and dry meat can mean the difference between surviving and starving in the absence of modern conveniences. It's a timeless skill that connects us to the resourcefulness of our ancestors and reminds us of how they adapted to a harsh and unpredictable world. Medieval winters were long and unforgiving, and staying warm was a matter of life and death. With no central heating or electric blankets, people had to get creative with their clothing and insulation strategies. Layering was the primary method, and it was far more sophisticated than simply piling on more garments. Each layer had a specific purpose, and the right combination could effectively trap body heat and keep a person insulated against the cold. The first layer, often referred to as the base layer, was typically made of linen. Linen was chosen because it was breathable and could wick away sweat, preventing moisture from chilling the body. This was crucial because damp skin could quickly lead to hypothermia in frigid conditions. The linen undergarment also served as a barrier to prevent coarse outer garments from irritating the skin. Above the linen, medieval people wore multiple layers of wool. Wool was the go-to fabric because of its excellent insulating properties and ability to retain heat even when wet. Woolen tunics, cloaks, and hoods were commonly worn, and they were often layered to create air pockets between the fabric. These air pockets acted as thermal insulation, trapping warm air close to the body and preventing heat loss. The outermost layer was typically a heavy woolen cloak or mantle. Cloaks were not only thick and durable, but also treated with lanolin, a natural wax produced by sheep, which made the fabric water-resistant. Some cloaks were even lined with fur for extra warmth, especially for those who could afford such luxury. Fur was highly prized not just for its warmth, but also for its wind-blocking capabilities, making it a valuable asset for those braving the harsh winter elements. Footwear was also a critical aspect of staying warm. Medieval people often wrapped their feet in woolen socks or cloth strips before donning leather boots. To keep their feet dry, they would stuff straw or hay into their boots, creating a natural insulating layer that absorbed moisture and retained heat. Hands and heads were similarly protected with woolen mittens and hoods, often lined with fur for additional warmth. Medieval people also understood the importance of trapping heat within their homes. Heavy tapestries and curtains were hung along walls and over windows to block drafts and insulate rooms. Straw and rushes were spread across floors to create a layer of insulation against the cold ground. Some homes even had raised sleeping platforms to keep people off the cold floor, preventing body heat from being drawn away by the ground. At night, people slept in close quarters, sharing beds and even huddling together for warmth. This wasn't just for comfort. Body heat was a vital source of warmth, and families would use it to their advantage during the coldest nights. The concept of nightcaps also originated in this period, as people wore woolen caps to prevent body heat from escaping through the head, one of the most vulnerable areas for heat loss. Modern survivalists can learn a great deal from these medieval layering strategies. Whether facing a power outage, camping in cold conditions, or simply wanting to minimize heating costs, layering with natural fibers like wool and linen can provide effective low-tech insulation. Moreover, the use of natural insulators like straw and fur, combined with strategic layering, remains a timeless and effective way to stay warm when modern heating systems are unavailable. Long before the invention of modern medicine, medieval people relied on nature to heal their wounds, treat illnesses, and even prevent diseases. Herbal remedies were an integral part of everyday life, and many of the plants they used remain effective today. The knowledge of herbs was passed down through generations, often preserved by monks, healers, and wise women who became the de facto medical practitioners of their communities. One of the most widely used medicinal herbs in the medieval period was yarrow. This unassuming plant was celebrated for its powerful healing properties, especially when it came to treating wounds. Yarrow was commonly ground into a poultice and applied directly to cuts and abrasions. Its natural astringent properties helped to staunch bleeding, while its anti-inflammatory and antibacterial compounds promoted faster healing. Additionally, yarrow was made into teas to reduce fevers and relieve digestive discomfort, making it a versatile remedy for various ailments. Chamomile was another staple in the medieval herbalist's toolkit. Valued for its calming effects, chamomile was often brewed into a tea to ease anxiety, reduce stress, and promote restful sleep. It was also applied topically to soothe irritated skin and was particularly effective for treating burns and rashes. In fact, chamomile salves were commonly used to treat wounds, as the plant's natural antiseptic properties helped to prevent infection while encouraging skin regeneration. Garlic, now a common kitchen ingredient, was considered a potent medicine in the medieval era. Its antimicrobial properties made it invaluable for treating infections, particularly respiratory and digestive ailments. Garlic was often crushed and mixed with honey to create a paste that was ingested to ward off colds and coughs. Additionally, it was used to create poultices for infected wounds. Some medieval healers even believed that garlic had protective properties against supernatural entities and used it as a charm against evil spirits. One of the most intriguing remedies of the medieval period was the use of willow bark. Long before the development of aspirin, willow bark was used to alleviate pain and reduce fever. The bark contains salicin, a natural compound that functions similarly to modern-day acetyl salicylic acid. Medieval healers would strip the bark, dry it, and grind it into a fine powder that could be steeped in water to create a pain-relieving tea. This practice laid the groundwork for the development of synthetic aspirin centuries later. Another essential herb in the medieval medicinal arsenal was comfrey. Known for its ability to accelerate the healing of bones and tissues, comfrey was often referred to as knitbone. It was made into poultices and applied to fractures, sprains, and deep wounds to promote healing and reduce swelling. However, comfrey was also used with caution, as it contains compounds that can be toxic if ingested in large quantities. This dual nature made it a powerful but potentially dangerous remedy, highlighting the importance of knowledge and experience in medieval herbal medicine. Beyond individual herbs, medieval healers also practiced complex herbal combinations. They created tinctures, infusions, and salves that blended multiple plants to address specific ailments. For example, a common cold remedy might combine peppermint to clear congestion, elderflower to reduce fever, and thyme to soothe a sore throat. These mixtures required a deep understanding of plant properties, as the wrong combination could be ineffective or even deadly. In addition to physical ailments, medieval herbal medicine also addressed mental and emotional well-being. Lavender, for example, was widely used to calm the mind and relieve stress. It was often dried and placed under pillows to induce sleep, or brewed into a tea to alleviate headaches. Similarly, rosemary was believed to enhance memory and focus, leading scholars to wear sprigs of the herb while studying or taking important exams. Medieval people also believed that certain plants had protective and spiritual properties. St. John's wort, for instance, was not only used to treat wounds and burns, but also as a ward against evil spirits and malevolent forces. It was often hung over doorways or carried as a charm, reflecting the deeply intertwined nature of medicine and spirituality in medieval life. Today, many of these medieval remedies have been validated by modern science, with studies confirming the antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and analgesic properties of herbs like garlic, chamomile, and yarrow. However, the effectiveness of these remedies also depended on precise preparation and dosage, a skill that was cultivated over years of practice and observation. For modern survivalists, the knowledge of herbal medicine can be a critical asset in situations where conventional medical supplies are unavailable. Learning how to identify, harvest, and prepare medicinal plants not only connects us to the ancient wisdom of our ancestors, but also empowers us to take charge of our health in challenging circumstances. Clean water was a precious commodity in the medieval era, and the methods used to ensure its safety were both simple and effective. Unlike today, where we rely on advanced filtration systems and chemical treatments, medieval people had to develop practical ways to purify water using only the resources available to them. One of the most common and reliable methods was boiling. By bringing water to a rolling boil for several minutes, they effectively killed off harmful pathogens, bacteria, and parasites that could cause severe illness or death. Boiling water was a straightforward but labor-intensive process. First, water was collected from nearby rivers, streams, or wells and poured into large iron or clay pots. These vessels were placed over open flames or hearths with wood or peat used as fuel. The water would be brought to a rapid boil, during which impurities would rise to the surface in the form of scum or foam. This scum was carefully skimmed off using wooden ladles or spoons, further reducing the risk of contamination. For those who didn't have access to firewood or fuel, another common method of purification was filtration. Medieval people constructed makeshift filters using layers of sand, gravel, and cloth. The cloth acted as the first barrier, trapping larger debris, while the sand and gravel layers helped to filter out smaller particles. In some cases, charcoal was added to the filter to absorb toxins and odors, much like modern activated carbon filters. This method was particularly effective for removing sediment and organic matter, though it wasn't as reliable for eliminating microscopic pathogens. Another intriguing technique involved the use of certain plants known for their natural purifying properties. Reeds, for instance, were often placed in water storage containers because they could absorb impurities and trap small particles. Similarly, people would crush the leaves of specific plants like moringa and add them to cloudy water. The plant particles would coagulate and settle at the bottom, taking contaminants with them and leaving clearer water at the top. Medieval people also recognized the importance of storing water in clean, well-sealed containers to prevent recontamination. Earthenware jugs, wooden barrels, and animal skins were common storage vessels. To keep these containers clean, they would be regularly scrubbed with ash and rinsed with hot water. Some even added salt to the water, creating a mildly saline solution that helped to prevent bacterial growth. In urban areas, access to clean water was more challenging, especially in crowded cities where waste disposal was a constant problem. Public wells and cisterns became breeding grounds for disease, and contaminated water supplies led to frequent outbreaks of cholera, dysentery, and other waterborne illnesses. To mitigate these risks, some towns implemented rudimentary water management systems, such as aqueducts and drainage channels, to keep freshwater sources separate from waste runoff. Additionally, many medieval communities placed great emphasis on boiling water for specific purposes, such as brewing beer and making soup. Interestingly, beer and ale were often considered safer to drink than water, because the brewing process involved boiling and fermentation, both of which killed harmful bacteria. Even children were given weak ale or diluted wine as a safer alternative to potentially contaminated water. For survivalists today, the principles behind these medieval water purification techniques remain highly relevant. Boiling is still considered one of the most effective methods for killing pathogens, and simple sand and charcoal filters can be constructed using basic materials. Learning how to identify plants with coagulating properties such as moringa can also provide a natural method for clearing murky water in a survival scenario. Furthermore, the practice of storing water in clean, sealed containers, a necessity in the medieval era, remains a fundamental survival skill in modern times. When it came to building shelters, medieval people had to work with the natural materials available to them, often with little to no tools. One of the most widely used and surprisingly effective techniques was the construction of wattle and daub structures. Wattle and daub was a method that combined a framework of woven branches with a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and even animal dung. This simple yet durable construction method provided sturdy, weather-resistant shelters that could be erected relatively quickly. The process began with the creation of the wattle framework. Flexible branches like willow, hazel, or alder were chosen for their pliability and strength. These branches were woven together to create a lattice-like structure, with horizontal and vertical components forming a grid. This framework provided the basic shape of the wall and acted as a skeleton to hold the daub mixture in place. In some cases, the wattle framework was reinforced with wooden stakes driven into the ground, providing additional stability and resistance against wind and other environmental forces. Once the wattle framework was completed, the daub mixture was prepared. This mixture typically consisted of a blend of clay, mud, straw, and dung. Each component served a specific purpose. Clay acted as a binding agent, mud provided volume and structure, straw added tensile strength, and dung helped to bind the mixture and repel insects. The daub was then applied to the wattle in thick layers, forcing it into the gaps and crevices of the woven structure. As it dried, the daub hardened into a solid, insulated surface that could withstand harsh weather conditions. Roofing was another critical aspect of medieval shelters. Thatching was the most common roofing method, involving the use of tightly bundled straw, reeds, or rushes. These bundles were layered in overlapping rows, creating a thatch roof that was both waterproof and wind-resistant. The angled design allowed rainwater to run off easily, preventing leaks and rot. Thatch roofs could last for decades if properly maintained, and they also provided excellent insulation, keeping the interior warm in winter and cool in summer. In more forested regions, people constructed simple log cabins or lean-tos using felled trees and wooden beams. These structures were often built using the cribbing method, in which logs were stacked in alternating layers and notched at the corners to secure them in place. The gaps between the logs were filled with clay or moss to insulate the interior and prevent drafts. Unlike wattle and daub, log structures were more resistant to fire and could endure heavy snow loads, making them ideal for colder climates. For those who needed temporary shelters, medieval people often constructed simple huts using branches, leaves, and animal hides. These huts, known as brush shelters, could be erected in a matter of hours and provided basic protection against wind and rain. The framework was made from sturdy branches arranged in a cone or dome shape, with smaller twigs and leaves layered over the structure to create a dense, weather-resistant covering. Animal hides were sometimes added to provide additional insulation and waterproofing. Another fascinating technique involved the use of earthworks. In times of conflict or extreme weather, medieval people would dig shallow pits or trenches and cover them with wooden beams, sod, or stone. These dugout shelters were partially underground, making them naturally insulated and concealed from potential enemies. Although cramped and dark, they provided excellent protection against wind, cold, and even enemy attacks. Today, these medieval shelter-building techniques are still relevant for survivalists and bushcrafters. Wattle and daub remains a viable method for creating long-lasting, eco-friendly structures, using only natural materials. Thatch roofs continue to be used in rural areas worldwide, while log cabin construction has evolved into a popular form of rustic housing. Understanding how to construct temporary shelters using branches, leaves, and hides can also be a life-saving skill in emergency situations, demonstrating once again how the resourcefulness of the past can serve as a guide for the present.